Do you think the Zionist movement recognizes that they've reached a point of no return? Do you think there's anybody within the ranks that doesn't recognize that this is very much a, like a Mussolini type situation that they've put themselves in?
Yeah, we've seen kind of glimmers of that. We've had ex-officials that work for Shin Bet and the Mossad saying that, we've fallen into Hamas's trap, and this is Hamas's goal to make Israel look bad, to make us isolated, to make us become a pariah state like South Africa. And they've actually referenced South Africa, but I don't see a very pervasive connection where they're making the connection between apartheid South Africa and Israel, because no, they still believe they're the victim. They've dropped like 2+ nukes worth of explosive ordnance on Gaza, still the victim. I don't see any large numbers of people waking up to the fact that Israel is becoming isolated. Plus they have their own internal disputes. Like there's growing concerns about civil internecine violence between right-wing armed Judeans and liberal Israelis who are completely disagreeing about the direction of the regime and where they wanted to go. So it's all falling apart. But no, to circle back to your question, I mean, if there are people that are recognizing, hey, we need to pump the brakes and stop this, they're not in the government. Now, there are plenty of pundits like in left-wing newspapers like Haaretz writing op-eds about this, but they're not making policy. And yes, they're still Zionists, but like at least they understand the basic dynamics of what's going on geopolitically, but they're not in government. So there's no breaks happening right now.
The danger of how far they're willing to take this, I think, is a complete unmasking of the unholy alliance between Israel and the United States, which has been going on for 75 years. But again, it was all done for the purpose of controlling Middle East oil. I mean, that's that it's the outpost, as they say, is that they had needed this land. And of course, we know that there's probably in excess of $1 trillion worth of natural gas under Gaza soil, which was probably the tipping point of, how they were going to figure out how to get this done. I am still of the, you want to call it conspiratorial mind, go right ahead, of the fact that I do believe that Netanyahu intended for October 7th to happen, and that they were looking for whatever reason they could in order to go in and do what they're, the ultimate case of mowing the lawn, because they do want to control that coastline front, which without question, when you think about the rich natural resource, that's what most wars or any conflict of this magnitude is usually fought over. It's fought over these very wealthy natural resources, and Gaza's no exception.
Yeah, that's true. And when it comes to conspiracy theories, like I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I don't believe 9/11 was an inside job. However, when it comes to October 7th, it doesn't matter if you're a conspiracy theorist or not, whether Israel had prior knowledge, whether they got warned and because of arrogance and hubris, they decided to disregard it, or they were completely caught unawares. Doesn't matter. Their reaction and their behavior would have been the same no matter what happened. So, when it comes to natural gas resources, yeah, Israel was created in part to control Middle Eastern oil. However, there were Joint Chiefs of Staff at the time, at the founding of Israel, General Marshal Admiral Nimitz, who wrote memos to Truman saying, hey, this is not the best way to do this. If we create the state of Israel, we will destabilize the region for a century to come. We will alienate the our potential Arab allies and leave the region open for USSR expansion and influence. And we're seeing that play out now with China, with Russia, with Iran, because we're no longer a stable actor. The United States and their unconditional support of Israel, this massive genocidal bombing campaign. Israel's also shot a consulate in Damascus of another sovereign nation, which is a direct attack on Iranian sovereignty. We are looking more like unreliable rogue actors. And who are you going to go with? You're going to go with the West that's complicit in this genocide, that's not acting in their own best interest geopolitically and therefore the best interest of their allies, or are you going to go with more stable actors like Iran, who responded to the bombing of its consulate with a performative strike? No damage was really done. And China, who just doesn't really get involved in armed conflicts, just uses long-term strategic planning like their Belt and Road Initiative to, make other countries more wealthy. And that's reductive. But what I'm saying is like, this is hurting Western hegemony in ways that I don't think Western politicians even realize. So
how much stake do you put in the fact that we have a president who is not cognitively there and creates a real vacuum in the power structure in DC?
Okay, so with Biden, yeah, I mean he's not cognitively there, but he's not the only mover and shaker of how these things work. There's Congress that's bought out that would support him unconditionally. The Senate also is, and it's not just bought out by AIPAC or Kufi, which is, if you're not aware, Christians United for Israel. There's a large lobbying bloc.
No, but if you could explain that real quick, I'm actually not too familiar with that. I know the Christian Zionist movement infinitely trumps the Jewish Zionist movement. A lot of people don't realize that. But if you could just talk real brief about that organization, I'm not as familiar with them as I am.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth looking into. It's just Christians United for Israel. They raise money for IDF units. They raise money to lobby politicians. It's just the Zionism on the Christian level. But the thing is, it's not just Kufi and AIPAC. It's also the MIC, the military industrial complex, the energy sector lobbying politicians for, to support Israel. So, there's a lot of momentum behind it. It's not just the president. Now, Joe Biden, his policy of unconditionally supporting Israel, because he does have executive power. He could halt arms shipments. He could force AIPAC to register as a foreign agent, which they should, because they are by definition a foreign agent. He has a lot of levers to pressure Israel. He has levers to pressure them in the United Nations because the U.S. is the head honcho at the UN Security Council. He has all these things he can do, but he doesn't. So, and I'm not sure if he's cognitively there. I don't think it mattered because he's a self-proclaimed Zionist. He has been. This has been his policy to unconditionally support Israel for the past 50 years, of his political career. He met Golda Meir early in his youth as a young congressman, and he's been hardcore Israel no matter what. So I don't think like this a dog's going to learn new tricks this late in life. So I've been trying to figure out why Biden's doing this, because it's so bad for long-term United States strategic interests. But I don't know. Maybe he is a religious Zionist, and it's weird because he's Catholic, but maybe there's a religious aspect to it.
Yeah, well, what makes it worse is he's an Irish Catholic, and of course, I'm Irish on my father's side, so I think that I think the hypocrisy is on a level that even he can't measure, because at the end of the day, Ireland was pretty much the first country that came out in support of the Palestinian people, and so how he squares that circle, I'm not really sure. But then again, it's American politics, and it's always the highest bidder that's going to get the support. And even when he tepidly suggested that he was going to change course in some way, the Zionist conglomerate that controls Capitol Hill said, well, maybe it's time for us to move over to Trump a little bit, and just kind of show them that if you think that it really comes down to Trump or Biden, they're nothing compared to the likes of the Bill Gates and the Bezoses of the world. They're the ones who control everything. And when they just make a decision of, we're going to move 100 million here, 100 million there, that's the way this works. And for them, I think it's a game. I think they just get a kick out of knowing that they can play God. I really do. I think there is something to be said for that power trip that, billionaire oligarchs are willing to go on. And even in the face of tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people that are going to die senselessly, to them, it's just another day at the office.
Yeah, that's true. But I would like to just give one small point about the billionaires. They aren't a monolith. There are plenty of billionaires in other parts of the world that form their own coalitions that oppose the Bezos, the Gates, and stuff like that. So that's beyond the scope of this conversation. But yeah, right. They're not a monolith. So, well,
no, I definitely agree, and we could definitely talk about it another time. But I do think BRICS is going to play a role, and I do think that there's a lot of competing interests in other nations. I think that you could see just how devastated the West actually really is, whether they're willing to admit it or not, that Bolsonaro is not in charge of Brazil anymore. And so there's these little things that you see. And you're right, China's that stealth operator that just waits to pounce when the opportunity is right. That is pretty much their MO. They have been very cunning in how they've gone about it. They have basically allowed us to kind of destroy ourselves from within. It's not like they really need to do too much. They kind of are just opportunistically waiting to seize all of these opportunities. And to be honest, if it wasn't for what's going on in the Middle East and obviously what's going on in Ukraine, I think we'd be front and center with Taiwan right now. Like this would, especially if Trump gets in, I mean, there's no question that that is something that I think will play a significant role in the next administration. It may play one again. I mean, again, I can't see Biden getting reelected, but however this ultimately shapes out, I do think that that is a future path that is going to be very dangerous. But as it relates to where we are right now, I don't really know if there is sort of, like you said, there is no exit strategy. There's no off ramp for them to take now. And if they're going into Rafah, this is kind of like this is the last resort, because there's already talks that there has been exchanging gunfire between Israel and Egypt. There's no telling how much worse that this can get. Do you see the prospect that it could spiral into like a World War III type scenario, depending on how many of the bigger nations decide to get involved?
No, I mean, the only flashpoint is with Iran, and Iran clearly doesn't want to escalate. We don't want to escalate. We've proven that. I think it was in February, one of the Iraqi militias shot a drone at a U.S. base in Syria. Oh, sorry, I meant Jordan. It was totally in Jordan. So a suicide drone struck the base. 3 U.S. service members died. I think 4x more were wounded. Then the U.S. was like, you cannot attack U.S. bases and kill Americans without consequences. Iran, we're going to hit you back hard. Hey, Iran, we're going to hit you back hard. 5 days later, yeah, we're going to hit it back so hard. And then 2 days pass. Yeah, we're waiting for weather because, we don't have like advanced targeting suites. We need to wait for weather. Essentially, they were giving Iran enough time to get all their assets out of the region because we're about to make 85 kinetic strikes in Iraq and Syria that hit empty warehouses and nothing. So we de-escalated. Then when Israel hit Iran's embassy in Damascus, they did the performative strike with their old missiles, not their new stuff, like stuff from the 80s, from the Soviet era, and got through the Iron Dome and the Arrow 2 and David Sling and hit military bases. And they were like, okay, show of force, that's enough. And they de-escalated. So no, I don't think World War III is going to happen over this. And yeah, gunfire happened with Egypt. There may be some skirmishes, but Egypt is one of America's largest strategic allies in that area because they're, so indebted to the World Bank and the IMF. They kind of have to do what we tell them. And yeah, they'll de-escalate. So whatever happened at the Rafah border crossing earlier today, where at least one Egyptian soldier was killed. There's a gag order on it because Egypt is involved in the ceasefire negotiations, which is a main priority for the U.S. State Department to actually get a ceasefire in place. So, I don't think we're going to hear much about it.
It's a very good point. And I'm going to bring up this image because I think this is so telling of everything that's going on right now. When you see just how much the Zionists try to constantly talk about, the Holocaust and what that represented. And now you look at this image of an IDF soldier who has destroyed it looks like a library. It could be an office, but the whole image of the burning of the books in the background is just so telling on so many levels that they have become the Nazis in so many ways. And you often wonder if the overall results of what transpired because of what happened in World War II, that if this wasn't just an inevitable road that we were going to head down because of the decisions that were made, post the end of the war between our nation, between the UK, and between Russia. And so...
Yeah. No, I will just say, we could single out the Nazis just because, they're the most prominent example of the ones we learned about in school books, but fascism is fascism. It all shares these parallels. Burning books was not exclusive to the Reich. You could do it in Spain, Italy, like any of the traditional Axis countries with their own ideologies. No, but because they're trying to cleanse out a different people, a different ideology, and part of that, what the Reich did, what Mussolini did, is destroying cultural sites, cultural artifacts, identity, erasing the history of what came before. This is not exclusive to the Nazis. They are honestly, they're trying to settle Gaza, and they're going to do a revisionist history eventually. That's what they plan to do. That we were always here. The Palestinians were just like refugees, and now they live elsewhere. And by the way, they were never really a people. Where are their books? Where are their historical sites? See, they don't exist. So yeah, it's because they intend to settle and colonize and rewrite history. It's not going to work, but they're going to try.